Hello, and welcome to Question in a Bottle. In this series of short discussions, private investor Mark Atkinson answers questions sent in by listeners and subscribers to his main podcast, The Desert Island Investor. So, let's take a look and see what's in the bottle that washed up on the beach today.
Well, a predictable question from Edward Brown. Thanks for your question, Edward, about the budget and how does it affect me? And probably the first thing is one of deep depression. It's almost as though I've been grieving for the last few days. And when we talk about this, the budget, it's a political and a financial event. So it's going to be very difficult not to encroach on politics because it's entwined with finances and how we live our lives. But we're not going to go into the whole budget, but just a narrow bit of it, of how it affects the businesses that I'm involved in and some of the tax implications for some of my investments. And really, if we just start from the top, the impact on business, really, the big takeaway is the increase in national insurance contributions. Also, the minimum wage and the differentials that be coming along, and employee rights. So it's going to be more expensive to employ people. And then you start looking at the portfolio and you think, well, which of my businesses is this going to affect further down the line? If you look at companies like MP Evans, I think they've got something like 8 UK employees. So national insurance contributions isn't going to be a massive hit to them. Most of their employees are in Indonesia. And then you've got companies like Me Group that are vending businesses, very low head count. They might be okay. And then at the other end, you've got people like, Tesco and Greggs, which have got lots of employees. So that's a greater percentage of your turnover is going on salaries. So it's going to be very, very interesting. And I would think that one thing that employers might start doing is look at greater automation and ways in which they can actually reduce the headcount, because a machine, as you know, Paul, doesn't get paid national insurance or a minimum wage. So that is something that could come along. And they say it's a budget for growth. Then I hope it is. I hope it works, because if not, then they could be coming back to us for more.
Okay, so those are your the stock holdings that you think are likely to be the most significantly affected, or the ones that are going to be least affected?
Well, MP Evans and Me Group as a couple, probably least affected. I'm just picking a couple out of the portfolio as examples, broad examples. Tesco and Greggs, perhaps more so. Or perhaps it might have been an advantage if employing people becomes more expensive for some of the competition, that it might make them topple over and they've got a greater share of the market. So, who knows? These things are very, very strange ways of playing out over the long term.
Yeah, I mean, that was one of the things I read a few comments about. People were saying, but it's fine that the minimum wage has gone up, but the national insurance contributions increase is more likely to be something that would dissuade private sector companies from employing people or putting their pay packets up.
Yeah. Well, we'll have to see, Paul. We'll have to see. So that's the broad aspect on the businesses. We'll have to wait on that. But a little bit closer to home, I've had a bit of a double whammy, I suppose. And the first whammy was talk about a number of my investments that are on AIM, and currently there's tax relief against inheritance tax on AIM. It doesn't apply to them. But from April 2026, this is going to change, and it's going to be hard. It's going to not be whole inheritance tax at 40%, but that'll be half, so an effective rate of 20%. So I won't say that I've ever invested specifically down to that tax advantage, but if I've been assessing up two investments and I'm undecided which is the best one to go for, then aim with the tax break might just swing it. And there is still a differential there, but it's got to be more compelling now on AIM than it was. So I think AIM's been struggling for a number of years. There's not been as many people coming to the market, and this certainly won't help. And these are generally Newer businesses or businesses that need more funding, and that's why there's been this tax break to try and attract new money in. So previously, well, as it stands, you have to hold AIM shares for 2 years, and I can see the argument that people amassed wealth over their life. They got to they're reaching the end, and then they invest their money into AIM. It qualifies for 2 years. They pop their clogs, and then the children or wherever it hurts them pulls the money out of AIM. So for me, I think one of the ways around that would have been to extend the qualification period to say 4 years or 5 years, because I'd have been happy with that as I'm a long-term investor. But I suppose one thing that the Treasury is looking at is, well, how can we get some money out of this, and whatever way they can to make sure that they increase their tax take. I mentioned that. The second whammy, Paul, is the effect on pensions, and defined contributions are to be brought into inheritance tax from April 2027. So we've got a couple of years yet, and who knows, I might shuffle off before then. And as it stands at the moment, the inheritance tax allowance is £325,000 per person, and that allowance is being frozen again up till 2030, and I think it hasn't changed that for 20 years, Paul, would you believe? I think it was 2009. So this is going to be dragging more and more people into inheritance tax. It's no longer for the landed gentry. Now, that 325,000 is called the nil rate band. And if you're married, you can pass that on to that gets passed on to your partner, so they get an effective 650,000. And on top of that, if you've got a property, you're given an additional allowance of £175,000 each. So that's again double, that's 350. So if you're passing on to your children, you've got an effective 1 million total allowance. But anything above that is taxed at 40%. So you've got nothing up to 1 million, but after that, the 40% starts kicking in. So we're not so bad where we live, Paul. You and I in Bolton and Darwin, but if you live in the south, then £1 million doesn't go very far these days, does it?
I believe not.
Yeah. So we're quite fortunate, but I think as we get further and further to 2030, with each successive year and inflation, then more and more people are going to start getting dragged into this. And these dates that I've given you there of April 2026 and April 2027 for the in the example of the pension changes, these are cliff edge examples. So we've had a little bit of a joke about this, but if there will be some circumstances like this, if I'm on life support at 11:30 on the 5th of April 2027, then what do you think my children are going to be doing? Speaking to the doctor, Paul. What do you think?
I think the new proposal for an assisted dying bill is actually quite well timed.
Yeah.
In respect to this. Do you think there's a coincidence there? Or?
Yeah, it will be. There'll be children booking Christmas presents off to Dignitas in Switzerland, no doubt. Just trying to get people, over the line quicker. But it is a serious. There will be people who just go, they pass away sadly. But either side of that deadline. And I can just give you one, particular example. It's not, pertaining to inheritance tax, but one of these cliff edges. I know a lady. We'll call her Margaret. And her husband had a very good job, but he was a little bit old school, I suppose. Male chauvinist. And Margaret was a housewife, and she brought. Her job was to bring up the family, the two children. And this was back in the days when with your pension, you could only buy an annuity. And he took out an annuity, and in order to max it out. His wife, I think, just had a little bit of a part-time job towards then, so not a lot of resources. But in order to max out his payment, he died with him and made no kind of allowance for a lesser payment to his wife if he died first. Now, he filled in all the paperwork, and then unfortunately he became terminally ill, and he was getting very, very close to that date coming in when it would become effective, his birthday, I think. And if he'd just have lived for one day past, I think it was 60th birthday or 65th birthday, the pension would have died with him, and everything would have disappeared. Now, fortunately, Mark, he died just days before this being triggered, and she lives a very good life now. But that's just an example of one day can make a massive difference, a very costly difference to some people. And this with inheritance tax, it's a really big dilemma of what there's all. I mean, these may seem like extreme examples, but they can exist. For example, I've just come up with a number to make it simple. If I gifted one of my children a 10 million investment, so that would be very, very nice indeed. So that's valued at 10 million. And then in short order, I depart, I shuffle off, and then that business goes bust within 7 years. Then my son or daughter will be liable for the inheritance tax on that, which at 40%. So they would have no money and have to find the 4 million. So it can be a little bit of a minefield.
So how have you been living up to this point then, in terms of your, estate planning?
Well, yeah. So I'm an investor, and I'm not a estate planner, and I've had to lean on a couple of people for advice. I'll get onto that in a moment. But this is the inner workings of what I've been doing. So I've got this defined contributory defined pension, and basically what I've been taking, that is my personal allowance. I've been just keeping that, so ineffectively I'm not paying any income tax, and I've been supplementing that with withdrawals from my stocks and shares ISA. Now Elaine's got her own pension separate to that. She's got an NHS pension, and what a cracking pension that is. They're a good one. So that's what we've been doing now. So, and I've been safe in the thought that save that, but it's at least something that could be passed on to the children at some point. Now, I'm now in a kind of a state of paralysis. If I die ahead of April 2027, then everything's sorted. But after that, it could be a problem for that if that pension becomes within, as it does now, the inheritance tax. Previously, my pension was not part of my £1 million, and now it's like added on top. So that, and AIM, the hit to AIM, it's like I said, that bit of a double whammy. But I'm thinking now, I retired at 53, which was early, and you think, how much do you need? And I was thinking about any excess I got, it can always be cascaded on to the next generation. And that the playing field has just been turned upside down. So really, how do you plan? Like I said, I'm an investor. I'm not an estate planner, and I've sought some more professional advice. I've communicated with Neil Allardyce at Fundsmith. He's been excellent for some ideas. He gives guidance. And also a very good friend of mine who I've known for 20 years, Anthony Keane at PM&M, and they're independent financial advisors. Anthony's a partner there, and he's been in this industry, I think, for about 40 years, something like that. But he's got this kind of thing, this knowledge under his fingernails, and these are the people that I'm probably going to have to turn to now to give me like a little bit of advice, because as we said, Paul, do your own research. We're not sure tipsters. I'm just a private investor, and certainly on estate management, that's something totally different. But I've got a number of options now, and I think foremost upon it, we've spoken quite a bit about it on this, and you've said spend it, haven't you? Let's go out and at least enjoy it now. So I'm shortly going to be off to Mauritius and Indonesia for 3 months, and you ain't seen nothing yet. So I could be like Phileas Fogg. So why deny myself the things so I can just gift 40% to the state at the end of life? Could I put an element into trust? When, where from, what asset class do I invest in? Do I move to another country? Do I start to give it away, and when? Part of the problem, Paul, is that with your children, if you gift it too early, then they might not be mature enough to handle it. It can be a great responsibility, can't it? And I think we were all, I don't know about you, Paul, were you much different at 20 with your money to what you were at 40?
No, useless at both.
Right, okay. Well, you do hope that people will get a little bit more savvy as they get a little older. But, another aspect is, do I just carry on? And it's a problem for my children. Ultimately, it's not a problem for me. It's a problem for what they will inherit. And I suppose if they look at they inherit 60% of something, then they might see it as a nice windfall. But I think it's part of the human condition to want to pass things on to the next generation. That's what I think. I mean, one thing that both Neil and Anthony came up with is that I could start withdrawing from my pension at up to 20%, and then I could donate that, pass that on to my children. Then they could reclaim that into their pension. So as a family, it's neutral. So that looks like a good suggestion and something to go down. In the immediate time, I don't have to make any decisions, but I need to start giving it some thought. And I think this is where I will have to get some advice and make some decisions. And I suppose a little bit of work, wait and see. There's a consultation period. I don't think anything massive is going to change from that, but you never know. Why rush into something now and things might change. But what I would say to you, Paul, is what it has done has hit my confidence. How can you plan for the future? And anything I do now, the goalposts could be changed. A new party might come in. They might abolish inheritance tax. They could increase inheritance tax. They could lift they could limit the lifetime gifting, or they could extend or abolish the 7-year rule, or they could impose an exit tax. So. I think what it is, I'm confused, really, and just probably need a little bit of time to. I'm getting my head around it a little bit now, but hopefully, I'll have a clearer picture over the next couple of years. So I don't know if you've any kind of lasting thoughts, Paul.
I would assume that your recommendation would be to, if anybody else is in the same situation, is to get some proper financial advice in respect to this, especially if there's quite a fair amount of money involved. But unfortunately, as you say, things could change, couldn't they? They could make all sorts of adjustments. I think if the government starts to see that people are doing one particular thing that's trying to circumvent them getting their hands on your money, they will probably make some kind of change to the system. Like you say, maybe they would limit the amount of money that you can gift. Or make that taxable in some way. I mean, they can do what they want, really, can't they? So nobody's got a crystal ball. But yeah, I think you need to talk to somebody professional, to avoid falling into a trap going forwards.
Yes, I mentioned something like PM&M. They've got a huge bank of people, and it's not just a case that you're going to speak to somebody who's done a 2-year qualification, and then you're going to be speaking to them. But I think one of the benefits of going to see an independent financial advisor is that they can give you something that's tailored to you, because no two people have got the same circumstances, Paul. We're all slightly unique, so they can look at it, and even they don't totally know, because one of the big problems we've got, Paul, is in any of these things trying to make a decision is we don't know how long we're going to live.
Yeah, true. Well, as I said, if anything to do with you lying in a bed with tubes attached to you and that deadline coming up, I've been making my own sandwiches if I were you. Wouldn't take anything off the kids when they come in to visit. Okay, Mark, so, I mean, there is a bit of time, I believe, before some of these changes take place, or are some of them, effective immediately?
No, like I said, on the AIM, that's April 2026. I don't think I'll do anything dramatic there, but on the pensions, I think that's probably the bigger one. It's a sizable amount of money that now is going to be liable to inheritance tax. That's going to be from April 2027. So really, nothing changes until then, and it does give me some time to come up with a little bit of a strategy to talk to people, to talk to the family, really, I suppose, as well. And if I do something where I'm gifting money to my children, they understand what it's all part of. What I'm trying to achieve. And if I'm giving it to them, they might be getting it now instead of later. I mean, one of the things to think about, on the pension, if I put into their pension, it's something that they can't tap until they're quite advanced. They might have to wait 30 years themselves, or are they better having money now? So even if that's I have to pay tax on that at this stage. So a lot to think of, Paul. A lot to think of.
Well, that's all for this episode. We hope that you enjoyed it. Please remember the content is for information only and it is not financial advice. If you have a question for Mark for our Question in a Bottle podcast, just complete the form on our website, thedesertislandinvestor.co.uk. Thanks again for listening. See you next time.